have their phone active so we can hear it.
This is an audio check. Check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Audio check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you.
The surreal part is that I see as myself as part of your family. Um, we've celebrated a lot together. Um, we we're now mourning together. Some of you have spent more time on my couch than my own children, and some of you have watched movies together, even though you're supposed to be working. Um, I've had a lot of time to remember your dad and to really focus on him as he lived. And one of the amazing things about this is you need to smile from behind the veil of tears right now. You gotta laugh a little, because that's how your dad would have wanted it to be. Sarah and I were kind of talking on the phone, and also this memory happened that I got to share before we even start. Was we were I had to give testimony in some legislator thing. It had to be healthcare because your dad was there representing the anesthesiologist, as he used to say. He liked to put people to sleep, so it was perfect for him. And there was the room was packed, but there was no state officials there. It was one person sitting up there doing the crossword puzzle as people gave testimony, and I was really annoyed. And your dad had this ability to he kind of leaned in like he was half teacher, half mobster, and spoke out of half his mouth. And he was like, "Well, this is how it is. You need a view that you're on the record." And then he goes. And I said, "But nothing's going to be accomplished here." And he goes, "Oh, you didn't read Robert's Rules of Order well enough. There's a clause in there that the chair perceives a quorum unless someone says there's a quorum. So he can make any motion he wants right now and make it law." And, and we chuckled and we laughed. But he had a way of taking the anger of somebody else's views and softening it. And it was like putting an arm around, kind of like a big brother would put his arm around a little brother and say, "Don't worry about it, I got it covered." I don't know why the last few years were as awful as they were. But there were some really, really good years too. And that's what you got to recall. Job said, "Adonai natan, Adonai lakach, v'hi shem Adonai mevarach." God gives and God takes away, but blessed be the name of God. And that's the secret. You can't answer the mysteries of life, but you can focus on the connection you have. And that's why we wear the ribbons, because we wear it right by the heart, because that's where the pain is the deepest. And we tear it because a part of us has been torn away by this death. So, tear the ribbons, guys. And then I'll make the bracha from the bottom. Yep, from the bottom. Okay. Okay. What happened to yours? Oh, you completely ripped it. Nice, Patrick, nice. All right, so let's make the bracha. I'm going to make the bracha. You can repeat it after me, and then we'll do it all in English, okay? And we'll repeat. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan ha'amet. Blessed are you, God, ruler of the universe. Oh, blessed are you, God.
Blessed are you, God.
Ruler of the universe.
Ruler of the universe.
Who is a righteous judge.
Who is a righteous judge.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, we're going to come over here and we're going to make the start of us. Folks, we've gathered here to say farewell to Steve. We knew this moment was coming. We didn't want to accept it, but we knew. We were watching him disappear little by little over the course of time. And yes, the Steve that died a few short days ago was the shell of the man that was for most of his years. But I have to tell you, you gave him one of the greatest gifts in the last few months, even through this awful period of quarantine. You were with him. You had the opportunity, donning masks and putting on protective gear, to say farewell and to return his love in ample measure. The psalmist says, Shviti Adonai lenegdi tamid kimi mini bal emot. I have set the eternal before me. God is at my side. I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exalt, my soul rejoices, my being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful one see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. God, you redeem the souls of your servants, and none who trust in you shall be desolate. Death has taken away a really good man. And you grieve. And tears are going to flow. But lost in that sense of grief, don't forget the blessings of life. God is with you. And God is with your dad and your brother. Steve's love can never be broken. It transcends the mortal span. There are things that we shared along life's path with him are now in the heart. And they will be with us always. We need to give thanks to God at this moment because there's so much for us to be grateful. So our tradition has it that we turn to the voice of Scripture to remind us of that gift called life that God gave us, especially in a moment like this. There's joys in life that need to balance out the sense of loss and sorrow. The first psalm says it this way: Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked, or taken the path with the sinners, or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight, and they shall study that teaching day and night. They are like a tree planted before streams of water, that yields its fruit in season, whose foliage never fades, whose fruit always flourishes. Adonai ro'i lo exarbin bino desha yarbatseni. Almei minachot yanachaleni nafshi yoshvev. Yoncheni v'malek sedek laman shemo gam ki elek b'geis al mavet lo ira ra ki ata imadi shiftaka umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai deshanta v'shaman roshi kosi revaya. Akto v'chesed yirafuni kol yemei chaya v'shafti v'beit Adonai le'orach yamim. The words I just said were the 23rd Psalm, a psalm of peace for a man now at peace. He's not alone. No, far from it. He's gathered with his kin. In the same way that you got each other around you right now, God is with your dad and your brother to sustain as he goes forth from this world to the next. There are two peaks we travel in life, and in between is that valley of death. There's one peak full of happiness because Steve Weingarten was at our sides, encouraging us, laughing us, encouraging us to root for the Bills, to support the Yankees and the Mets. But there's another side that is an enduring joy. That's with Steve in our hearts, where his lessons are etched in your souls forever. And all you got to do is close your eyes and remember. When you act like he would have wanted you to act, he's with you. When you close your eyes in the middle of the night and you miss him, his voice will come there. When you take issues to heart and you act on them and advocate for those in need, he's with you. That's the legacy of Stephen Weingarten. He's always present. So now it's time for us to recall with love this man. The psalmist says we do it like a tale is told. And truth is, there's a lot to be told. For a guy who was 65 and a man who was so disabled for the last few years, there's a part of his life that will always be full of richness. And you here are a token of all that. I'll talk about him in a second, but I'm going to let you speak first. Hold on a sec. Let me just clear this up for you.
Growing up in Yonkers, the person I admired most, without question, was my big brother, Steve. He was everything I wanted to be. He was an excellent student. He went on to an Ivy League college, which was pretty much unheard of where we grew up. He was a star athlete, a fearless 165-pound middle linebacker who often played hurt. And this was back in the day where they told you to rub a little dirt on it when you probably got a concussion on the play before. He was an all-county baseball player. In his senior year, he had one of the highest batting averages in the entire state. And he even made the varsity basketball team, which was no small feat for someone who exaggerated his height at 5'8". He also dated the prettiest girls in school, and he had the charisma and leadership qualities that led to his election to student government. He was simply the popular kid. I wanted to be just like him. He grew up in a neighborhood which was predominantly Italian. There weren't very many Jews. And let's just say things didn't always go so well. Steve, through his force of personality, transcended this. He was a leader. He was 5 years older than me and was my protector. If any of the older kids picked on me, they had to deal with my brother. Not only did he protect me, but he also insisted that I be allowed to play in the neighborhood games with the older kids, always. I could not have asked for a better big brother. When it was time for me to select a college, there was never a question my top choice was Cornell ILR. That's where Steve went. Steve graduated from Albany Law School, but decided to forego his practice of law and chose government and politics as his profession. It made perfect sense. He loved helping people, and he loved the political game. He started out in government, moved on to public interest organizations, and then he built one of the most powerful lobbying firms in Albany, specializing in healthcare clients. He created a bipartisan firm with his Republican partner, Bob Reed. This approach was unheard of at that time, and frankly, we could use a little more of it today. He had such a passion for life and the ability to make anything fun. People wanted to be around him. He loved food and drink, softball, the Yankees, golfing, so much more, and people just loved being around him, and he just loved being around people. I have received countless phone calls this week from his friends, family members, and it all had a common theme: his ever-present smile and just how much fun it was being with your dad. His work led to new laws which decreased smoking, aided the prevention of cancer and lung disease, funded home care for the elderly, funded the disabled. His life was impactful, and the state of New York is better for him. Many legislators in Albany have their stories about critical legislation which never would have occurred without his guidance. All New Yorkers benefited from his impactful career. But for Steve, his most important life's work was his family. He married Linda Sarr, and they had 2 beautiful girls. They loved each other very much, but his wife Linda was taken from us too soon. It is fitting that they will now be resting here side by side for eternity. Allie and Sarah, we are all so proud of you, how you stepped up and helped care for your dad this past year. You too, Dan. You found him a perfect last home, and you always made sure he was visited and cared for. He married Susan Savage, and they had 7 terrific children. Steve loved his big family and was so proud of all of you and your accomplishments. He loved attending your games, your performances. Who could forget those family vacations at the beach and the lake? For the younger ones who didn't really have enough time with your dad before his illness, I can only tell you he was one of a kind. A special person with a zest for life who loved each of you dearly. When I would spend time with him at various New York City hospitals before we knew his diagnosis, while he was undergoing treatments and was separated from you, he was always willing to do anything necessary, take any risk to get back to being with you, his family. It was his only priority. In his last year, upon his return to Albany, when I visited him, the only thing that excited him were visits from all of you, and of course, his beautiful new granddaughter, Linda. We are all living in challenging times right now. This should have been a service attended by so many people who cared about Steve. It is tragic that his mother and father can't be here in person. But we know they are watching and are with us in spirit. I had so many conversations with Steve where we spoke about how lucky we were to have such special, loving parents. He knew how much you loved him. We all love you, Mom and Dad. Our brother Rob, who also has a special relationship with Steve, shared so many special times. I know how much Steve loved that Grateful Dead concert last year that Rob traveled from Tampa to Albany to attend with his big brother and the rest of you. And all of Steve's extended family are truly saddened by his loss. We wish you could all be here with us, but we feel your presence. Steve had such a big heart and took care of so many people in his lifetime. We all know that in the later years, Steve suffered from PSP, a terrible illness which robbed him of so many of his best qualities and preventing him from living the life he deserved. I choose to remember my brother as the hero he was growing up to me, and ask all of you to remember him also at his best. Farewell, big brother. My heart is broken, but your memory will live inside me and in the hearts of so many others you touched in your lifetime. Thank you.
That was really good. Thank you. Okay. Can you hear me? Because the mic is higher. Okay. I wish we were not doing this funeral with 10 people in person, but in some ways, maybe even more people get to be here because it's being live streamed. And Dad would have appreciated that it is saving people money on travel. So I wanted to use my time today to share stories that celebrate my dad's life because he had so much life, even until the moment he died. In fact, that spirit was the hardest thing for my dad, and for me too, in the final act of his life. This man moved 100 miles per hour until he physically could not. I couldn't keep up with him. It gave me some relief, actually, in the last couple of years when finally he was ready for bed at 10 p.m. I was just used to him wanting to go, go, go. In our best memories, my dad took us on trips to New York City every Christmas to see Broadway shows. My brothers to baseball and football games and weird wrestling matches. He took us to Lake Placid in the winter, and my dad was really a summer/warm climate kind of guy. Never really a huge fan of the snow. I apologize to him like every time I got him in the car these past couple of years. But I remember going down a hill with him at Whiteface Mountain, and he literally was stuck and couldn't get down. He was much more comfortable poolside, but he tried. He loaded up the big white van and drove us all to Florida. On one trip on the way back north, we crashed at our friends, the Siemens, in Myrtle Beach, and the Capones, the houses and the Moors at Kiawah Island. My dad was never afraid to ask to crash someone's vacation. He really wasn't afraid to ask for a lot of things, which is a trait I have inherited in honor of my dad and often to the horror of my friends and family. But as my dad believed, if you don't ask, you don't get. Dad took me and my siblings to a Shaggy and Backstreet Boys concert. He wrapped himself in pink towels, pink water shoes, and pink clothing if that was the only thing available, and he had no shame. He just really didn't care what people thought, and for better or worse, I am like him in that way. My dad had a sensitive soul. He said, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. He cried easily, and he loved children. My dad was a great driver, and he had an amazing sense of direction. There were moments, but for the most part, he was a great driver. That's not something I inherited. He liked driving at night because there was less traffic. I hate driving at night. My dad was not a great cook, but he always made breakfast, Eggo waffles and cereal. He did the grocery shopping and got what we wanted, but we ate most of the goodies by Sunday night. When he lived in Florida because he needed help from his parents, he couldn't wait for us kids to visit. He just loved having us come. He didn't have a usual life, but the life he had, he did make the most of it. In a more just world, my dad would treat our whole family to a cruise in the Bahamas with unlimited food and drinks, and we would wear silly t-shirts and hats with matching slogans, and my dad would be the happiest guy on earth. But we never had that point with my dad. My dad taught me a lot of things, including that the most important thing is your health, which is a quote he got from Grandma Hilda. And I'll do my part to take care of myself in his honor. I'll try. If I close my eyes and go to my most happy childhood memory, I'm on the boat at our camp on Owasco Lake on a warm summer day with my sisters and my brothers and my best friends. And we have the most amazing spread from Wegmans. And you bet my dad is the captain and he purchased the spread. I want to thank everyone who helped out in his last act. Dad was especially grateful to spend so much time with his kids, especially Kate. What a joy to be able to spend so much time with her. We had great times. We love you, Dad, and we hope you can rest easy now.
Or wherever you want to. Right. I just wanted to share some memories. I didn't have anything prepared. I thought it was important that we remember the good times and the good memories that we shared with my father. And for the people watching on the live stream who might not know me, I'm Brendan, child number 7 out of 9. And what Allie was saying about him driving the boat on Owasco Lake, having us 9 kids in the boat, maybe some cousins, some grandparents, and maybe we had too many people on the boat. And I think about those times. I think about being at baseball games. In his obituary it said, he liked to take us to games at Yankee Stadium, Shea Stadium, minor league baseball games at Falcon Park in Auburn. And I just remember no matter where he was, he just instantly became friends with all the people around him in the other rows, and it was like they'd known each other their whole lives. I remember once at Shea Stadium, we were at a Mets game, and It was the center fielder, Carlos Beltran. He was, my brothers Patrick and Connor were chanting at him all game to throw us a baseball. And the stadium has 50,000 people in it, and we were in a packed-in bleachers, and for inning after inning they chanted at Carlos Beltran to throw a baseball. And I didn't think he'd throw one up, but maybe later in the game, around the 7th or 8th inning, I'm sitting next to my dad in the bleachers, and Carlos Beltran catches the third out. He throws up a baseball, and I just remember being 8 years old, all these tall people, all these hands go up around me, and one person came down with the ball and barehanded it, and it was my father, and he gave it to me, and I always remember that. Another thing in his obituary that was said was how he loved attending our sporting events, sometimes as an observer on the sidelines, sometimes as a coach. And in this story, he was the third base coach for Connor's team in AAA. And what happened is they were in the last inning, and Connor was on second base. And what happened was it appeared that the final out was made, and the other team started to celebrate their victory. There was only one problem, is that there were only 2 outs, and only 2 people on the field knew it. It was my father, the third base coach, and Connor at second base. And he mouthed the words to Connor, "Run." And Connor went home, scored the tying run, and it's things like that that we'll remember. And one thing I remember worrying about as his health started to decline was whether the some of the darker days when he was really sick might overshadow some of the good moments that we had. And from just the messages our families received over the past few years, I now know, I'm confident that people have remembered all the good things, and I've heard so many stories from people that I didn't even know before, and that have showed that people remembered all the great things that he's done, all the times he stopped to say a kind word or went out of his way to be nice to somebody. And I was glad to see that that's what he'll be remembered for. And I think there's one last story I'd like to share that I hadn't heard until yesterday. My grandfather Richard told it, and it really defines who he was on his best days and who he was in his soul. My grandpa Richard was the county Democratic chairman in Westchester County. It was a very Republican county, a Republican stronghold at the time, tough for Democrats in politics. My grandpa Richard was running for judge, and there was a Republican family, a Greek family, that owned a restaurant, and they would usually donate only to Republican candidates. My grandpa Richard was confused to receive a donation in the mail from this prominent Republican family that donated a lot, and he didn't know why the donation was made, so he went and asked the guy. He said, "I appreciate the donation, but you usually donate to Republicans. Why do you donate to my campaign?" And what the gentleman said, he went to school with my father. He said, "When I was a kid, I was from a Greek immigrant family. I didn't speak English very well. I was bullied at school, and there were kids at school who threatened to beat me up. And there was one person who stood up for me, who said, and to paraphrase, that anybody who wants to touch him has to go through me." And I think on his best days, that's who my father was, always sticking up for people who couldn't defend themselves. Other than that, we'll love you. We love you. We'll miss you, Dad. And hopefully we'll see you on the other side. I remember the last time I spoke to him, It was 2 days before what would have been his 66th birthday yesterday, and I was hoping he'd make it then and we could sing happy birthday to him. And I tried to keep his spirits up, and I said, after a while of talking about sports and politics to cheer him up, I said, Dad, I'll see you tomorrow. And I wasn't able to see him tomorrow. He passed away a couple hours later, but it was great to have those final moments to talk to him. Instead of see you tomorrow, we'll see you one day, Dad. And until then, we love you, we miss you, and we'll pray for you.
That was really beautiful, all of you. I had, all right, I'll pick up the family practice here. I have a whole eulogy written myself, but Rob said it beautifully, and I could just hear Steve saying, come on, you know, and moving on from it.
There's
So
Gershon's at home.
There's Gershon, exactly. But look, in the last 2 or 3 days, I was talking to some of the guys in the some of the parents in the neighborhood, and talking about Steve's death and how he lived his life. And there's some memories that we shared that you need to hear. Steve loved family above everything else. And I remember there was one story that we told about being at the JCC pool. Brendan and Jack, you must have been, young, because your dad was pushing an empty double stroller. And I remember people looked at him and said, "Where's everybody?" And he goes, "You mean they're not here?" Oh! And he looked around and had that Steve smile that kind of brought us that laughter that, he had everything under control. And I always used to love watching him at a baseball game. He had one eye on the field and one eye on whoever else was running around. And that was something that, as a parent, was enduring and endearing. Meet the teacher night or back to school night at Rosendale Elementary, we always used to joke about, all right, how is Steve and Sue going to pull this one off? With all these kids in elementary school. And Steve just shrugged and said, it will be. And I thought what amazed me more than anything was the confidence and trust that he had in all of you when all the rest of us parents didn't have that type of confidence in our own kids. Yes, some of us parents were helicopter parents and snowplow parents. We would clear the way for our kids. That's not Steve's style. He empowered. He encouraged. He laughed at you. He encouraged you. And he nurtured you. And if need be, he'll pick up a battle for you. But he didn't make things happen for you. He encouraged you to make them happen for yourself. I cannot tell you what an incredible model of that is as a parent. Yeah, there were times that he was a little frustrated with some of you. I'm not looking at anyone in particular. But there was other times that frustration was also pride. Yeah, the last few years were horrible. It robbed him of so much. But you rose to that occasion in ways that none of us could ever dream of possible. I need you to remember that. PSP is a terrible disease, a rare disease, but an awful disease that have robbed him from you from years before. But don't you dare forget the good days. And you should be proud. To loving parents, Richard and Rita, the fact that you can't even physically be in the same room at this time adds to that sense of grief that you can't be here. but know how proud and loved Steve was as a reflection of your love. To his brothers, Mark and Rob, and to sister-in-laws Diane and Sue, and to other sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws, Julie and Kenny and Maureen and Jack, and all the nieces and nephews, there was nothing more special. To Linda's mom, Selma, who still supports and encourages, we grieve with you. And to Susan, these are mixed emotions, and our heart reaches out to you as you try to be mom and deal with your own feelings at this time. May Steve's memory be a blessing for you. You know, you were right, Allie, when you said that this place be far larger if we were able to be together and indoors. But you had that Steve twist on it, which is, hey, we opened it up on the world of the internet now and far more people could be there. That is how Steve looked at the world. If there was a curveball, he'll find a way to hit it. If he had an obstacle, he'll find a way over it or around it. May his memory be for a blessing. May we tell the stories of this man's life for many, many years to come. It's now time for us to remember him and to entrust his body to the Spirit of God. El malei rachamim shochem beromim hamim mitzei menucha nechana tachat kanfei hashchina im kirushim u'toharim kizohar harakia mazhirim et nishmat Yeshua Baruch ben Yehuda Aryeh Hillel v'Rivka shehalach la'olamo Baal harachamim yistareha b'seter kanafav la'olamim b'tzur hachayim et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato v'yanoach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Stephen Barry Weingarten, who has entered eternity. Oh God, let him find refuge in your eternal presence and comfort in the shadow of your wings. Let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life, for God is surely his inheritance. May he rest in peace, as we all say. Amen. It's time for us to say Kaddish, a traditional prayer. This prayer never speaks of death. It speaks about a glory of God. And it is said when a person's life comes to an end as a way of saying thank you to God and to encourage God to keep an eye on them. As we transition to a world without your dad, your brother, we called Steve close to our heart. And this is the prayer of strength that says our faith doesn't end when we bury. If you want to join me, Mr. Levine has cards for those who want to join. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah v'yalma divrach hirutei v'yalmich malchutei v'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayet t'kol beit Yisrael b'agalav's kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mivarach le'olam omei almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitroman v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalao shemei d'kudisha brichu Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechmata, damiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn. There was one last image I have of Steve that is perfect for right now. Weird, it's about Halloween. We used to gather. Remember when we used to gather at the Daly's house and we used to go up? Your dad used to position himself at the end of a driveway or at an intersection to kind of keep an eye on everybody. And that's what was amazing. He always kept an eye on us. And as we say farewell, we're asking God to keep an eye on him. Jewish tradition says that the last thing you're supposed to do is place earth in the grave. Because your dad doesn't belong here anymore. We have to hasten his journey to whatever comes next. But it's a farewell. As if, as Brendan, the chance to tuck him in one last time. It is that chance to ask God to stand at the intersection and kind of keep an eye on him as he goes from one place to another. And just tell him through this act how much you love him. Jewish tradition also says it's something you don't want to do. So when you go forward and you take the shovel, turn it upside down first. Place a little bit of it upside down, the first shovel in, and then the second 2 regular, 3 shovels. Let me invite you to step forward to do so.
There, you remember the direction?